Good day, everyone. Welcome to today's program. I am Tang Jingyuan. Xi Jinping has descended into a state of frenzy and acute paranoia. Successive waves of purges have swept through the upper echelons of the military, yet no matter how thoroughly he cleans house, it never seems clean enough. The general who carries a bow, the figure believed to pose a mortal threat to him, appears to remain perpetually concealed in some unknown location, poised to launch a counter-strike. Xi Jinping is no longer calm. Seizing the opportunity of the PLA and Armed Police Forces delegation meeting during the National People's Congress, he went all out to warn and intimidate the military leaders present. You must behave yourselves. You must obediently follow the party's command, and you must harbor absolutely no divided loyalties. As the Chinese Communist regime enters its garbage time phase, Xi Jinping's grip on power has become increasingly precarious. At this moment, history has brutally stripped the CCP back to its original form, completely tearing away the facade of serving the people. Xi Jinping clings ever more tightly to the barrel of the gun, believing that doing so will preserve his life and extend his rule. Yet he himself has forgotten one fundamental truth: history never stands still. The gun in his hand is one he no longer trusts. Even it could misfire at any moment and blow him to pieces. Xi Jinping's core leader crisis. Everyone looks like the general who carries a bow. Xi Jinping's once dominant core leader status is now shaking more violently by the day. He sees the shadow of the general who carries a bow in virtually everyone around him. On the afternoon of March 7th, while attending the plenary meeting of the PLA and Armed Police Forces delegation at the National People's Congress, he delivered a fierce and pointed admonition to the assembled military brass. He stated that the military is the one that holds the guns, that it must never harbor divided loyalties toward the party, that it must maintain absolute loyalty, and that the party's absolute leadership over the armed forces must be further strengthened and unswervingly upheld. He declared that corrupt elements must not be allowed to hide within the ranks. Xi also demanded reform of the military expenditure management system and tighter supervision of capital flows to ensure that every single cent is used where it counts. Footage from CCTV's Xinwen Lianbo broadcast shows a clear contrast with last year. This year, the number of military generals seated on the rostrum and in the inner circle of the PLA and Armed Police Forces delegation plenary session has visibly decreased. On the rostrum sat only Xi Jinping and Central Military Commission Vice Chairman Jiang Shengmin. All other CMC members have already been purged. In the inner circle were 4 full generals and 4 lieutenant generals. The 4 full generals were Defense Minister Dong Jun, Central Theater Command Commander Han Shengyan, Eastern Theater Command Commander Yang Jibin, and retired Northern Theater Command Political Commissar Fan Xiaojun. The 4 lieutenant generals were CMC National Defense Mobilization Department Director Zhang Laik, CMC Joint Operations Command Center Deputy Director Dong Li, Western Theater Command Deputy Political Commissar and Director of the Political Work Department Zhang Xiaoying, and CMC Political Work Department Deputy Director Chen Demin. Jiang Shengmin immediately performed an act of loyalty on the spot, lauding the 2 establishers as the most significant political achievement of the new era, and stressing the need to continuously consolidate the core of loyal maintenance and resolutely follow Chairman Xi's command as the political foundation. The sycophantic display was so obsequious it gave listeners goosebumps. Dong Junxi's fellow townsman with Peng Liyuan hurriedly chimed in, stating that at this critical juncture of the 15th five-year plan, political army building remains the foundation, and that being strong politically is the most fundamental kind of strength. Every word was carefully aligned with Xi's line, implicitly conveying, "Rest assured, boss, we have no one else in our hearts and absolutely no second thoughts toward you." The sweeping purges of senior military officers have created an atmosphere of grim intimidation throughout the upper ranks. Both CMC Vice Chairman Zhang Yuxia and Chief of the Joint Staff Department Liu Zhenli were investigated at the end of January, leaving military delegates attending this year's meetings in Beijing in a state of high anxiety. Several generals, upon entering the venue and facing the media, refused to answer questions, remained completely silent and hurried away. Xi Jinping encounters blowback. According to the Wall Street Journal, Xi Jinping's repeated emphasis that the military must ensure absolute loyalty to the party runs directly counter to his own plan to rebuild the senior command structure, advance military modernization, and enhance war preparedness in order to strengthen China's strategic position in competition with the United States. Having already removed most of the top generals, these repeated large-scale purges have seriously damaged morale and undermined command stability within the PLA. Citing official data, the Wall Street Journal reports that dismissed military representatives account for more than one-third of all deputies removed from the current National People's Congress, far exceeding any other delegation. 9 military deputies were formally removed at the end of February, and another 3 generals were expelled from the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference last week. As some military deputies remain under investigation or have suddenly vanished from public view, further removals are likely in the coming period. Xi's military purge campaign has left the senior command echelon in constant turmoil. The CCP's claimed 2 million-strong military is already suffering from widespread demoralization. With commanders being rotated like a revolving door, no one knows who is actually in charge, let alone whether genuine loyalty exists. Over the past 2.5 years, Xi Jinping has removed dozens of senior commanders. Of the 6 members of the Central Military Commission, the PLA's highest decision-making body, 5 have already been purged. The purge reached its peak in January this year when Xi's closest military deputy, General Zhang Youxia, was himself targeted. Since mid-2023, more than 75 senior military officers and defense industry executives have been investigated, removed, or abruptly replaced. These include leaders from the Army, Air Force, Navy, Rocket Force, Armed Police, and multiple theater commands, especially those responsible for operations against Taiwan. Of the 81 officers promoted to full general during Xi's tenure, at least 25 have been expelled from the party, removed from office, or placed under investigation, nearly one-third. The Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington estimates that since 2022, approximately 100 senior officers have been removed or disappeared, affecting roughly half of the PLA's top leadership positions. M. Taylor Fravel, director of the Security Studies program at MIT, observed, "The depth of this purge demonstrates Xi Jinping's profound dissatisfaction with the performance of the PLA leadership, which has been a major driving factor. Yet while purging is relatively easy for Xi, filling the resulting power vacuum is far more difficult. At present, only one Xi loyalist remains in the Central Military Commission, Zhang Shengmin, a career political officer with limited operational experience. Many critical positions responsible for operational planning and large unit command are currently being filled on an acting basis by deputies or lower-ranking officers." Joel Wuthnow, a senior research fellow at the National Defense University in Washington, noted, "Xi Jinping will face an enormous task in selecting replacements. The key criteria will be loyalty, professional competence, and specialized expertise. Of the current 7 CMC members, only 2 remain in post. To fill the vacancies, Xi must secure approval from the more than 350-member Central Committee and convene an intra-party meeting, a time-consuming procedure. There is, however, one potential upside to Xi's approach. After removing the most powerful and entrenched military figures, the next generation of generals, though possibly lacking combat experience, may be more familiar with digital and informationized warfare." Tai-Ming Chung, a professor at the University of California, San Diego, suggested that Xi may use this purge to promote younger generals from the technology domain, such as those with backgrounds in cyber warfare and aerospace. Nevertheless, Wuthnow cautioned that within the PLA's pervasive culture of fear, newly appointed generals are likely to refrain from offering candid advice to Xi Jinping. Xi may also allow chronic understaffing at the top levels of the military to persist until the next party congress in 2027, when a comprehensive reshuffle could occur. Regardless, it will be extremely difficult for Xi to find another figure with the unique stature of Zhang Youxia. As a princeling whose father was a revolutionary veteran, Zhang himself participated in combat during the 1979 Sino-Vietnamese War and the 1984 border clashes. Thompson, a former Pentagon official, pointed out, Sycophants without combat experience will only tell Xi what he wants to hear. Zhang Yuxia's wisdom, experience, and personal relationship with Xi made honest and objective input possible. Before his purge, Zhang Yuxia was among the most powerful figures in the PLA, wielding significant influence over major decisions and personnel appointments, an influence that could potentially make him an alternative power center, precisely what Xi fears most. Wu Guoguang, a senior fellow at the Asia Society Policy Institute, observed, "The closer someone is to the top leader and the more important they are, the greater the potential threat they pose to Xi Jinping." A scholar at Singapore's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies noted that the CCP's political system itself encourages officials to seek advancement and security through personal networks. Even under today's strongman leadership, the regime cannot entirely escape the corruption problems inherent in Guanxi-based politics. The CCP regime returns to its violent origins. The military becomes Xi Jinping's last life preserver. China's economy is accelerating into decline, and the very foundation of CCP rule is undergoing violent collapse. The grandiose promise of common prosperity has become an illusion. The legitimacy of CCP governance has evaporated, and the party has torn off its serve the people mask to reveal once again the fangs of a regime that originally seized power through violence. The military has become its final life preserver for maintaining control. Yet Xi Jinping has forgotten that while history may move in cycles, it never returns to exactly the same level. The CCP has destroyed its own credibility and is now worth nothing. Thus, when Xi frantically and hoarsely demands that the military must never harbor divided loyalties toward the party and must maintain absolute loyalty, it only proves that the CCP's harsh ideological indoctrination and tight control over the armed forces have already failed. The so-called 2 million PLA soldiers are now a pile of loose sand, ready to disintegrate at the first real shock. Xi Jinping wishes to use the gun barrel to prolong CCP rule, but today's gun barrel is no longer the same instrument that once seized power. The gun in the CCP's hand is already covered in rust. No one knows when it will backfire and blow off the very hand that believes it controls it.